what we're gonna do is the full like rider experience.
Okay.
Because have you ever seen this shock before?
Not before today.
Okay. Have you ever changed CTS? Are you familiar with CTS technology maybe into a... So that's the perfect
Brand
testing.
new, yeah.
Brand new. Okay. So we will follow the steps that are the same that the riders will find in the owner's manual. Okay. First, remove the shock from the bicycle.
Done.
Done. Okay. That's a good mechanic.
Mechanic.
Okay. And do not unscrew the spring.
Done.
Perfect. Okay. Second, turn the lockout lever to the closed position. Okay. Perfect. Unscrew the reservoirs cap.
Yep.
Now, using a shock pump, that can be any shock pump, remove all the air from the reservoirs. Okay, this is very important. You have to do different times to be sure there is like no air. Now you can remove the shock pump and then you can screw the reservoir cap back on.
Back on.
Okay.
Done.
Done. Now position the shock on the vise with the compression knob in upward position. You don't need to over tight too much because just to like having the shock. Exactly. Turn the compression knob in the fully open position. Using a T10 torx tool, remove the screw from the compression knob. Here we go. Using a 13mm socket wrench, this guy here, unscrew the CTS from the shock of the body. By doing this, use a paper towel because a little bit of oil may drop. So what we suggest is like you can take like a paper like this. So nice and clean. Here we go.
Okay.
Now you can remove the CTS. One thing, there is a... Okay, perfect. Done.
Everywhere.
No, it's okay. Perfect. This is our suspension, not suspension oil. This is not the same of the fork. This is specific for the shock. By just using a bleeding syringe, put 2 cc of oil back into the shock. So 2 is a little bit more than what you really needs at this point.
Okay.
But we suggest to do a little bit more, and then if some oil drops out while you're inserting, there is no problem at all. But then you are 100% sure that you have the exact amount of oil that you need on the shock. So at this stage, you're good to go.
Okay.
Absolutely. So now choose CTS. What do you want? The gold, the orange? The orange is the standard one. Let's say the medium. Then the gold is the softer, and the green that we just removed is the firmer one.
I'll go gold.
Gold. So now insert the desired CTS by pushing it inside the shock body. At this point, push until the O-ring of the piston goes into position. By doing this, use a paper towel because a little bit of oil may drops. So this is the thing that it can be a little bit tricky at the beginning because you have the O-ring. You don't know because you never did before how much pressure you need. So if it's the very first time, you may go very gently, and you need a little bit more. So it can be, let's say at least for the first time, tricky. But yeah, you need to hear a click. Here we go, and then push it until. Here we go. Now with the socket wrench, screw the CTS back in, applying 7 Newton meter, but you can also not use. 7 Newton meter is just means it's like when you feel that the thread is at the end, stop wrenching. Reinsert the compression knob and then reinsert the screw on the compression knob by using a Torx T10 tool, which is this one. Now that it's a new CTS, you are not sure that it's fully open in compression because it's a new one.
Okay.
You open the other one, and because then you have to reinsert the pressure, you want to do it with a fully open position. So now you have to be sure that this CTS is in full open position in compression. So going towards minus again, all the way down. In this case, it was already in the, yeah.
And I don't need to touch this lead.
No. At this point, you can turn the lockout on.
Yep.
Sorry, on, off, sorry. Yeah, unlock. And unscrew the reservoir cap again. With the shock pump, put 95 psi in it. The shock is made to operate at 95. Perfect. And now you can screw the cap of the reservoirs back in, and it's done. You change the shim stack. Have you ever changed a shim stack of a shock before?
No, not before now.
Have you actually saw a shim stack? Like never, you don't have it, okay.
No.
But you did it.
I've done it.
On this one.
I
What's
think I
that?
could do it again without instructions, so
Yeah.
it must be easy.
Very easy.
Yeah.
So the good thing of the CTS that we're using on the shock is that compared to the one that we are using on the fork, you don't need a special tool. It's just standard tool that everyone has in his workshop. Yeah. The little disadvantage is that you have to take the shock off the bike. That's the only thing that you have to do.
I'm pleased with that.
Yeah.